Formula E has been a motorsport close to my heart for the last couple of years, and in today's video we're going to be previewing the 2019/2020 Formula E season. Now, I've been following this sport since the very beginning. Of course, there were lots of skeptics at the very start, and I think even myself, someone that just loves any sort of motorsport formula, I was somewhat skeptical about what was going to happen, whether this was going to be like a 1 or 2 year thing. But it's caught on. Massive manufacturers are now well and truly sort of the top of this sport now, and it's really good to see that Formula E has developed and really just improved year upon year. And going into this new season, very exciting times I think are ahead for this, because so many big teams are now in this sport, so many really top level drivers. I mean, you're starting to look at this as a, somewhat a competitor to Formula 1. I mean, personally, I'd never seen it as a competitor, but the drivers you have in Formula E now, okay, maybe they don't compete with the very top of Formula 1, but some of the guys towards the back end of the Formula 1 grid, you could see Formula E drivers swapping into their places quite comfortably, in my opinion at least. But nonetheless, let's go through the 2019/2020 Formula E season, and let's speak about where the championship's going and who are the drivers competing in this year's championship. So let's start off by looking at the calendar, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the biggest championship calendar Formula E has ever had. It certainly looks like it, but maybe I am wrong in that regard. But nonetheless, we start off with 2 rounds at Diriyah in Saudi Arabia on the 22nd and 23rd of November. Then, strangely, a 2-month break. We go to the 18th of January with our next race in Santiago, Chile. And then we have a round in Mexico, Marrakesh, Sanya Ypres in China, the Rome Ypres in Italy, the Paris Ypres in France. Then we get into a couple of new rounds, the Seoul Ypres in South Korea on the 3rd of May. A month later is another new round, Jakarta Ypres in Indonesia on the 6th of June. And then we have some of the regulars to end off the season. The Berlin Ypres, the New York Ypres and the London Ypres holds a double header to end off the season, but this time it's a very interesting one, held at the ExCeL London Exhibition Centre, an inside/outside course. It's going to be very interesting and different. I've got my fingers crossed that that's a success, but you never know what's going to be going on. That is a very new idea to come to Formula E, and they're all about pushing new ideas, but that is quite revolutionary. I've got my fingers crossed, as I said. I hope it works out for them. So let's go through the drivers and the teams now that are going to be competing in this season of the Formula E Championship. I can't believe the 6th year of Formula E. It's quite astonishing, really. It's gone very quickly since that first season, the dramatic crashes and all that sort of stuff. It's time has flown, and I'm happy to see it continue for so many years. But nonetheless, the drivers and the teams. So you've got Envision Virgin Racing, they've got an Audi power unit, and they've got Sam Bird and Robin Frins as their drivers. You've got Neo 333, they've got a Neo power unit with Oliver Turvey and Mark Wingha as their 2 drivers. Mercedes officially in the championship now, not just as HWA, of course have a Mercedes power unit and a strong driver lineup of Stoffel Vandoorne and Nick De Vries. Geox Dragon, Penske, sort of involved with them as well. They have a Penske power unit, and their 2 drivers are Brendan Hartley, a surprise addition, and Nico Müller, a very good driver in DTM. Audi Sport Abt Scheffler, of course having an Audi power unit, have Lucas Di Grassi and Daniel Abt, one of the few teams to keep their driver lineup from the previous season, and could be of course one of the ones to look out for this year. DS Chatita, obviously double champion with John-Eric Verne and very strong in the constructors for a number of years now. And their 2 drivers are John-Eric Verne, of course, staying for another year, and Antonio Felix da Costa moving across from BMW. Now, Porsche entering into Formula E was a massive thing for the sport, announced quite a while ago now. I think it was over a year ago they were announced to be joining Formula E, but they took their time, they've done a lot of testing, and they're in the sport now with their own Porsche power unit as well. Neel Jani and Andre Lotterer are both previous Porsche drivers, or both continuing as Porsche drivers, but Neel Jani, someone who had ventured into the sport for a couple of races with little success, whereas Andre Lotterer has of course had a lot of success at DS Techeetah alongside John-Eric Verne. Now Venturi, an interesting team, 2 very strong drivers. They have Mercedes power unit. Felipe Massa and Edo Mortara continue over from the previous season. Then Panasonic Jaguar, of course having a Jaguar power unit, Mitch Evans stays for another year after coming close to the championship last year, but James Calado might seem like a random addition, but we'll speak about him later on. Nissan Edams also keep their lineup, of course having a Nissan powertrain for this year. Ollie Rowland and Sebastian Buemi, the two drivers. BMW looked like an infamous force at the start of last year before it petered off and slowly sort of feature in the midfield predominantly. Have got a strong lineup this year of Alexander Sims and Maxi Günther, with of course a BMW power unit. Mahindra, the final team on this grid, of course having a Mahindra power unit and keeping their driver lineup from previous years, Jerome D'Ambrosio and Pascal Wehrlein. A great grid. I think that's the biggest grid, or it definitely is the biggest grid Formula E has ever had. A brand new team coming into the sport, Mercedes taking over from HWA, and a lot of nice little features in there as well. People like James Calado, who had so much success in the junior categories before running out of money, where he saw his counterparts go to Formula 1 that finished below him in GP2 in the years around him. He's someone I'm going to be talking about in a bit. But nonetheless, I've got a huge amount of talking points here, so hopefully you've got time. And also I want to predict my top 10 for the Drivers' Championship at the end of this video, so stay around. This could be a long one, but I'm looking forward to it. It's a nice little discussion and I hope you enjoy. So, pre-season testing has been going on at Valencia over the last couple of days. Of course, I've been keeping my eye on it. I've, as obviously said, been following Formula E since the start. Absolutely love it. And when pre-season testing starts, everyone gets a little bit excited. We all start thinking what could be for the season ahead, because we all have our opinions, but how many of those are going to come true? So, of course, leave any thoughts and opinions on anything I say in this video. I'm always up for listening, and I would love to start any conversations in the comment section down below. But nonetheless, my first note on my list, my big list, is BMW seem to be going quite quick in pre-season testing. Now, Maxi Günther hasn't driven a huge amount of Formula E races, neither has Alexander Sims, and the question is whether they're going to be able to continue on this form throughout the season, because of course there will be continuing development. I really like the driver lineup actually. Alexander Sims has been someone that's been so underrated throughout Formula racing and GT racing over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. Was never given that opportunity to even get to Formula 2/GP2, and I always was a bit gutted because I always thought he was quick enough. And Maxi Günther had strong performances in Formula 3 for a number of years before decent enough season in Formula 2 in 2018. And I feel like he had some promise, but he got dropped for some reason last year for a couple of races for Felipe Nasr, but then goes on to score, I think it was 20 points last year in comparison to Jose Maria Lopez, who I think scored about 3 points. So Maxi Günther really came on strong last year. I think once the momentum was flowing for him, he was doing a really exceptional job for the Geox Dragon team, who I think were probably maybe the second worst team on the grid. Feel free to disagree with me on that, but I feel like that's, they were definitely one of the bottom 3 teams last year, and he was putting out some decent performances. Of course, the way that qualifying is structured, where the slowest drivers go last in the session, giving them better track quality, giving them better lap times, it was always going to favour someone that was down the bottom of the championship, missing a couple of rounds, inevitably not going to be scoring enough points to get him that far up the championship after missing, as I said, 3 rounds, and the points that could have gone along with it. Apologies. So I've got sidetracked here, but I think it's a solid lineup, and I think BMW looked to have a good car. My thoughts were, are they going to be able to keep this going for a whole season? Now, of course, that's a big question. I don't want to be putting anyone down there, but of course they don't have, the team as a whole doesn't have the most knowledge of Formula E, with their 2 drivers being relatively inexperienced and BMW having only been in the championship for a couple of years. So it's very interesting. I've obviously got my fingers crossed. I'm actually a big BMW fan. I'm a big fan of a lot of their drivers, support them in DTM as well. So, I'm rooting for BMW. I want BMW to go and win the championship this year. I think it would be nice to see someone that isn't DS Techeetah. Why do I keep messing up that? I can't even say it. Them, or someone like Audi. I'd like to see someone different come to the fore, whether that's someone like Envision Virgin or BMW, someone like Mahindra. I'd like to see someone different win the championship this year in constructors and drivers. But That's just my thoughts. But nonetheless, BMW look very quick in pre-season testing. Their drivers are sort of up there in the top 5 in majority of runs. Gunther and Sims, I think, both are good enough to challenge for wins. Over a season, that might be the tough one. I'm not sure they've got it as a whole package over a season. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch for 2019/20. So Jean-Eric Vergne comes off of a great couple of years in Formula E, back-to-back champion, and if you look at the stats over the last couple of years, he really has just been absolutely astonishing. I mean, I look at last year's season actually. The first half of the year was quite rocky for a huge amount of the championship. And then you look at the second half of the season, it's just podium after podium for Jean-Eric Vergne. You can see why it all came good to him, because he was just always there in the second half of the season. As I said, everyone had a rocky start to the previous season, Season 5. And I was surprised that no one could just take the stranglehold of the championship. It was just taking forever. People were just really struggling to get to grips with it. But once it happened, once people were able to do it, it was Jean-Eric Vergne that managed to do it. Will he make himself a triple champion this year? I think this will be his toughest task yet. I think that DS Techeetah, why can't they have an easier name? I think they'll probably not be as far ahead if they are ahead this coming year. I think that with Da Costa coming to the team, it'll also provide a bit more of a challenge to Vergne. I think that Andre Lotterer was great, but he didn't challenge Vergne enough, which is interesting. I think maybe once Lotterer is the clear number 1 within a team, which I feel like he might be at Porsche, he might thrive a bit more. But when he was always a bit in Jev's shadow over the last couple of years, I don't think that really brought out the best in Lotterer, and it didn't enable Vergne to be pushed. But, you know, if Vergne gets pushed by Da Costa, starts making some mistakes, that should be really exciting for a little intra-team battle between those two. So that's, I think, something we've got to watch out for this year. I think Da Costa's he's stepping out of his sort of home for the last sort of 5 or 6 years. Like, BMW has been really good to him and given him a lot of opportunities, but he's sort of stepped out of that now, and he's going alone, and he's going into sort of an unknown ballpark here, because he doesn't know what Jev's going to throw up. I think that, as we were sort of mentioning about number 1 drivers, Da Costa's sort of always been the number 1 driver, at least over the last couple of years at least, and it's a little bit worrying for Da Costa if he goes into Jev's team and gets sort of demolished. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Da Costa will be, you know, pretty strong against Vergne. I don't think he'll be able to beat him over a championship season, but I think we'll definitely see some races where Da Costa, you know, beats him on actual damn speed. But we'll see. We're going to other drivers that are sort of making a big step this year, or could maybe be making a big step this year. Robin Frijns, I think that he had a really good year last year. I don't think the Envision car was particularly great for the majority. I think the Bird was sort of leading the championship or thereabouts for the first part of the season. Then the second half of the season, you can count, you know, you'd struggle to count all the reliability failures on one hand. He had so many issues in the second half of the season, as did Bird, and then also factor in a couple of accidents as well. It wasn't the greatest second half of the year, and that thwarted any chance of a championship for him in Season 5. So I think he'll come back stronger, and obviously his teammate, as we've been speaking about, Frijns, he's going to have a good year as well. I always think that Frijns has been one of the best drivers in the junior formulas over the previous years, and a little bit like we were speaking about earlier with Alex Sims, never really given the opportunity to go up too far. You know, Robin Frijns had a couple of GP2 races, if I remember correctly. You know, did quite well, if I remember correctly as well, but just ran out of money. You know, was a Caterham test driver. That's about as much as he could sort of, I guess, push himself to in terms of maybe his bit of sponsorship backing. That's maybe what he could get. I don't really know what really worked out there, but it's a topic for another day. But yeah, Robin Frijns, always a great driver, and I think now a second season within this team, definitely a more front-running team than he's driven for in the past, should enable him to go for more victories and maybe for the championship, so that should be exciting. Now, his counterpart and good friend from DTM, Nico Müller, close to the championship this year against Rene Rast in DTM, ultimately did come a little bit short, but nonetheless, I think Nico Müller will be a really strong driver in Formula E. I think a lot of people won't know him. Of course, he's a bit of an outsider in terms of just Formula E. I don't think his name's been mentioned too much. You know, if you're a big fan of Audi, you'll probably hear his name because he was their test driver, their reserve driver for the last couple of years, but he never got the opportunity to race for them, only do a couple of tests. But he's a very, very quick driver, and he beat Robin Friends in the 2019 DTM Championship, so hopefully that gives you an example of his calibre. The problem is he's driving for the Geox Dragon team, which I think ultimately is not going to be as competitive as the Envision team. So it's going to be a tough season, I think, for Muller. I don't think he's going to be able to jump into Formula E and go for victories outright. I mean, that's going to come back to bite me, isn't it? Because I know he's a very talented driver, but I'm sort of expecting Geox Dragon not to be that quick. I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong because I want to see both their drivers do well this year, but I don't have the highest of hopes for them this year just because they haven't had the greatest couple of seasons. As I said, last year they scored something like 23, 24 points, something like that. It wasn't that much, and they really, really were quite far behind a lot of the drivers and teams on the grid. So, yes, take it for what you will, but I think Friends and Muller, two DTM drivers that you really got to be looking out for this year. And you know, I obviously I'm a massive fan of DTM myself. I just love watching all of those races, and I think it's nice to see a lot of Formula E drivers and DTM drivers sort of coming together and doing, you know, multiple championships next year. I think there might be one overlap, which might be a problem, but nonetheless, I think it's exciting for Formula E to get some DTM drivers, very good drivers. And if you haven't heard of Nico Müller, I think you definitely will understand how good he is by the end of this upcoming season. Now, I'm not sort of going off a particularly strong storyline here. I'm just sort of going through a couple of main topics that I really want to speak about. And my next one is it finally Jaguar's year? Now, they've had a testing time over the last couple of years in Formula E. Until last year, that was, when they sort of really stepped up their game and had some really strong performances. They got rid of Nelson Piquet quite quickly. They replaced him with Alex Lynn. Didn't manage to do that much better, but I think the consistent throughout the previous season was that Mitch Evans was just great throughout the whole year. I think that's testament to where he finished in the standings, because I don't think that car was as good as where Mitch Evans managed to finish the championship. I mean, we look at the championship last year. He fell away at the end a little bit. It was tough. Well, sorry, not really fell away at the end, but he had a couple of bad results towards the second half of the season, which meant he couldn't really challenge for the championship. But he finished 1 point behind Friends, 3 points behind Di Grassi. I mean, Di Grassi, one of the most successful drivers in the championship, in an Audi factory car. You know, fair play. Robin Friends, sorry, what am I saying? Mitch Evans was, top 5, just behind Robin Friends and Di Grassi. So, Mitch Evans, he won a race last year in Rome, multiple podiums, very consistent. It could be a good year for him. And his teammate, I wanted to speak about this earlier, I wanted to get onto this somehow, and we've stumbled upon it, and that's James Calado. So, if you have no idea who James Calado is, go to his Wikipedia page, and that will show you a lot of gold numbers, showing you how good he has been over his previous few years. Now, James Calado was a driver with so much success. He battled Valtteri Bottas for the 2011 GP3 Championship. He had multiple victories and a lot of podiums in GP2 in 2012 and 2013, finishing third in the latter, and that, you know, he finished ahead of some Formula 1 drivers that year. I mean, Sam Bird finished just ahead of him, someone you might know, but Felipe Nasr finished behind him, Marcus Ericsson finished behind him, Jolyon Palmer finished behind him, Alex Rossi finished behind him, Mitch Evans finished behind him, Robin Friends finished behind him, Rio Haryanto finished behind him, Daniel Abt finished behind him. You get my drift. James Calado is a very, very good driver. Now, I get that jumping from a Formula 2 car, for example, to Formula E is different. They're not like the same car whatsoever. They're very, very different cars. Now, you've got a lot to learn within a Formula E car, which is quite exciting. And if he can do so quickly, he's a real shout for maybe Rookie of the Season. I mean, I know we haven't got too many rookies this year, but you know, I'd put my money on him being Rookie of the Season, if I'm perfectly honest. I think he's got a really strong chance of scoring maybe a podium or two, and if he gets the right, luck of the draw, possibly a victory, if he can sort of get to understand the sort of complicated factors of Formula E, maybe. I can't even say it properly, so that's how complicated it is. So, yeah, very interesting for James Collado. It's a nice signing. I'm really happy that Jaguar took this punt, because I think Alex Lim is a very, very good driver, but I don't think Formula E ever suited him too well. Obviously, Nelson Piquet really struggled, and it just didn't really work out for him in his last couple of years of the sport. But yeah, James Collado, it's going to be a really exciting season for him. And as I said, I've got a nice suspicious feeling that he's going to have a good, successful year. I realise I've got like 10 more tough subjects to speak about before I even give my top 10 predictions, so I better get going through these. Nice little point just to note here. Brendan Hartley coming to Formula E for this season 6. Now, that's exciting because, of course, he was a recent Formula 1 driver. Now, I don't like Formula E being known as sort of F1 rejects sort of championship, because, unfortunately, some people that have no understanding of Formula E say that, and that's just a bit of a shame. But in reality, it's nice to see someone like that who has got lots of options in the world of motorsport, racing in the top teams. He's already racing in the World Endurance Championship, for example. It's nice to see him make this step and come to Formula E, because if anything, there's more for him to lose in Formula E than gain, because he's sort of already proven himself, had a great career, won multiple championships at the highest level, driven in Formula 1, had a couple of decent results. And if anything, coming to Formula E and finishing like 18th in a lot of races could really do his self-image more harm than good. But I don't think that's going to happen. He's actually looked quite decent in pre-season testing, actually. I know pre-season testing is just a number, but I think it means more pre-season testing in terms of Formula E in comparison to something like Formula 1, where I think there's a lot of mind games in Formula 1, like, oh, here we go, we've got to try and slow down a bit here, so, Mercedes don't think we're quick or whatever. Whereas I think Formula E is a little bit less like that. I think there's a lot more correlation between who was quick in pre-season testing last year to who was quick at the start of the season come the actual first race. Now, I know there's a lot of things that can go on here, because obviously you can have a good car at the start of the year and then it can sort of get worse and worse as the season goes on, and you could be midfield by the end of the year. Kind of what happened to BMW last year. But where am I going with this? Nonetheless, what I'm really speaking about is Brendan Hartley. He should have a decent year. He should have a solid amount of points by the end of the year. I can't really see him battling for the championship. He might even struggle to get top 10 in the championship overall. But nonetheless, if he can have a couple of competitive races here and there, I think he'll count the season as a success, because, let's be honest, a little bit like Nico Müller, who we were just speaking about, and James Collado, he's new to this. And Formula E isn't as simple, I guess in sort of quotes, as other series. You can't just jump across to it and expect to be quick. You've seen certain drivers take a number of years to get quick, and then once they are finally quick, they're very quick. But it took them a number of years. A bit like Robin Fringe, you could say. He took his time, but when he got there, and once he fully understood how to be quick in a Formula E car, he's right at the front, and could be battling for the championship this year. But nonetheless, Brendan Hartley coming to Formula E, big thumbs up from me. So, what I thought was interesting is that Brendan Hartley didn't go to Porsche. Nice little segue here. Porsche. I think they honestly, unfortunately, might struggle this year. I can't see them coming to Formula E and maybe doing a Techeetah. I said it right behind me. I can't see them coming in and be like really successful straight away. I know Techeetah weren't right at the front when they first joined Formula E. It took them a little bit of time, but they got a win in their first season and multiple podiums. I think the problem was that back then, when Techeetah started, it was a much less competitive grid. Whereas now, you look at Formula E and there are so many good teams, so many good drivers. I think it's quite unlikely that Porsche come in and manage to. Well, I don't think they're definitely not going to dominate. I don't think they're. I'll be honest, I don't even know whether they're going to get a victory this season, which is quite tough to say that because they're a massive company. I don't think they'll get a victory. I don't think they'll probably even get top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. Andre Lotterer possibly, but it might be a bit of a stretch because they've got a lot to learn. Obviously, they've done a lot of pre-season testing, like pre-season testing. They've been doing a lot of development on this car. But it's... Well, from all the stuff that's happened in the past in Formula E at least, you go on that logic. I don't know whether they're going to be able to jump in and have a lot of success. It might take them a year or so to get good. And That's kind of nice if that happens. I don't want Porsche to come in and be very quick straight away. I don't think that would be good for Formula E. It wouldn't be a great image. It wouldn't be that. It would kind of give the idea that you could just spend a huge amount of money and just come in and dominate this championship, which I don't think is the case. You've got people like Audi who've been in it basically since the start. You've got people like Virgin who have been here since the start as well. There's a lot of teams here that have been here for a very long time and have got a lot of knowledge that Porsche might not quite have. And even if their car's quick, it doesn't say whether they're the whole team understands Formula E to a T, because there are little quirks of the sport which the teams that have been in the championship for a number of years might have a little bit more understanding of. So that could be quite exciting. But I think my note here that I've trying to been getting to is that a Porsche may struggle, and I think that's quite a likely assumption to be making early on. Their paces in pre-season testing, nothing special, mediocre, but it's pre-season testing. We don't want to read too much into it, but it's exciting and it's nice to speak about something. So, Pascal Wehrlein. Now, many of the fans' favourite driver, one of my favourite drivers in Formula E. I've probably mentioned it a few times. I'm lucky enough to have an interview with Pascal Wehrlein 2018, just last year actually, when he was in his last few races in DTM. A really, really nice guy, someone who I think is incredibly talented and deserving of a race-winning and championship-winning car. My thoughts are that Mahindra might struggle a little bit this year. I think they had a good car a couple of seasons ago. Was it 17-18? I think they had a really competitive car. Felix Rosenqvist, battling away for lots of victories, lots of podiums. I kind of want to see Mahindra return to those times. It was a bit of a struggle in the second half of last year. So, got my fingers crossed. Pascal Wehrlein, and Jerome D'Ambrosio, both very quick drivers. And I really, really want to see Pascal Wehrlein get a win this season. I mean, he came close on a couple of occasions last year. I think that if he had known Formula E a little bit better, he would have got those victories. There are a couple of things that were... I guess he was a rookie last year. That's quite surprising when you think about it. But yeah, what I'm trying to say basically is Pascal Wehrlein, he has a point to prove this year. Last year was his rookie season. You kind of discount that to some regard because he was learning a lot. But this year we need to see Pascal Wehrlein on the podium quite regularly. Maybe get a victory in there. A solid sort of top 8 in the championship. We need to see it happen. And I want it to happen. As I said, I'm a fan of Pascal Wehrlein. I want to see him do good things in Formula E. So, I've got my fingers crossed for him. But I think he's that point to prove if he does want to get back into Formula 1, which I think is still a very real goal for him. There have been rumours floating about over the last couple of years. So, yeah, come on Pascal. Have a good season. Do it for us. And hopefully in maybe 2021, we will see Pascal on the Formula 1 grid again. That'd be quite a few years out, but it would be nice to see someone go from Formula E to Formula 1. Because I think I sensed from the interview I had with him that Formula 1 is the dream. And everything else below it is still good, but it's not quite where he wanted to be in his career in motorsport. So, I realise this video is getting quite long. We're nearly at 30-minute point already, so I'll get through some points quickly here. NIO, they look off the pace. I think it's very, very expected they will be the slowest team on the grid. Their driver lineup as well also doesn't inspire too much confidence that they'll get that much better over the season. I actually really rate Oliver Turvey as a driver, but in Formula E over the last 2 seasons especially, he's really struggled, and I can't really see him getting into the points on a number of occasions. If he gets a point or 2, that'd be a good sort of race for him, really. Mark Winghaar, actually very good driver in touring cars. If you watch the World Touring Car Championship, you know how good he can be. But in a single-seater, he's never really had the pace. So I don't know what this sort of move is, but I think that, NIO is going to be at the bottom of the grid, and it's a shame for their fans. Mercedes. Okay, I know this is technically their first year in the championship, and I've already mentioned throughout this video they might struggle. But in my mind, they need podiums this year. I mean, you look at Mercedes in Formula 1, winning everything basically, or winning the big titles. They're not winning every single race, but they're winning the things that matter, which is the World Championship. Sort of like 6 times in a row. Blimey, that's just crazy, isn't it? But yeah, 6 times in a row, drivers and constructors championship winners. Because of course, you now know that it's going to be Hamilton or Bottas for the championship, whatever, which is going to be settled in the next couple of races, whatever. So yeah, Mercedes, they need podiums this year. They're 2 drivers, very good. Nick de Vries, F2 champion, very quick. Stoffel Vandoorne, previous GP2 champion, ex-McLaren driver, in my opinion, not given enough time in Formula 1. Very quick driver. They're going to be looking for podiums. If they don't get podiums at all this year, they're going to be very disappointed. Now, I think the way that Formula E works and the strange qualifying means that it's quite likely they'll probably get a podium this year, because I think their pace will be good enough. But in pre-season testing, I've seen Nick de Vries has made a couple of mistakes already. I hope that he gets those ironed out before the season starts, because I think they both need to come together, have a good Constructors' Championship this year. They need both drivers to be performing. So that's going to be very interesting to see. But I think, Mercedes, if they don't end this year with at least a couple of podiums, they're going to be disappointed. They came close on a couple of times last year, but it was more down to the way that qualifying was sort of set out and on tracks where they couldn't really overtake. So it meant that Stoffel Vandoorne was sort of closer towards the front. I think also Gary Paffett deserves a shout. He wasn't that bad last year. He got screwed over quite a few times. But Gary Paffett, multiple DTM champion, he deserves a bit of credit. I mean, I understand why they replaced him with de Vries, but yeah, I hope that Gary Paffett gets the top line drive somewhere in motorsport soon, because he deserves it. He definitely deserves it. We mentioned it already, 14 races, a longer championship season, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see how the teams cope with that. I mean, over the last couple of years, it's only one more than last year, and if we look back to the 2017 and 2018 championship, they're on 12, so it's been slowly growing each year. Starting off with a double header, finishing with a double header. I think that's always a nice idea, and it's nice to see that we are continuing a trend that they've tried on a couple of occasions already in the year. I mean, it was actually 2017, 2018 they last did it to open up the championship with a double header, but nonetheless, I think it's nice to see. More races is always a good thing. New events as well, as we mentioned already. Obviously Adira came to Formula E last year, wasn't it? I think it was last year. And then also you got some staples of Formula E history, racing in places like China, Mexico, Morocco, Chile, France, Italy, US, no Canada, which is quite a shame. I want to see them go there. Germany, but then what I'm trying to get onto here is that the 2 new rounds here, South Korea and Indonesia, obviously exciting for the Asian motorsport fans who obviously love motorsport. You see the Japanese Grand Prix just a couple of days ago, really. But yeah, really just fantastic, really, just to see the amount of support, and it's nice to see Formula E going to these new countries. It does mean that obviously we're missing off a couple of events that I personally am a massive fan of. Those being the Swiss E-Prix. I went there in its first year and absolutely loved it. So personally a little bit disappointed that that's not in the championship anymore. And also Monaco, that's not there right now. So I think that might be coming back, because I think that alternates, doesn't it? That goes every other year. So that'll be back at some point, probably for next year. So I'll have 15 races hopefully. And I guess technically London E-Prix is sort of different. It's nowhere near, in London terms, the last E-Prix in Battersea Park. We're in the XL London, which I think is on the other side of London. I should really know. I sort of worked there. But yeah, nonetheless, it's completely different. It's a weird one, racing some of the race outside, some of the race inside, going in and out of buildings. It's going to provide some interesting racing, and if it's raining, for example, that's going to be very interesting. It's England. It's going to be raining for at least one of those races, or at least one of those practice sessions. So enjoy if you're going. So nonetheless, that's exciting, and I'm hoping that many fans will flock to the XL London to enjoy this E-Prix. I don't think I'm going to be able to, because it clashes with an F1 event, I think. Yes, it does. Well, no, sorry, it clashes with another event I'm doing. Apologies. But yeah, it'd be a great event. If you can get to it, go to it, and it will obviously hold the championship decided most likely as well. So exciting times, and it's nice that it's finishing there instead of New York, selfishly. So, nonetheless, yeah, I've sort of got off topic there, but yeah, great to see the championship go to new venues and visit kind of old venues, which is nice. Technical changes. So, some things that I wanted to mention for this year, and I think that's important to know, is there are a couple of different changes for this year that might affect the overall running of the races. So, the use of twin motors are going to be banned for this season, which is obviously quite important because a couple of the teams were using them. Also, drivers will not be able to activate the attack mode during full course yellows and safety cars. Now that is where drivers were kind of just trying to get rid of it, because obviously on certain tracks it was losing them quite a lot of time, and some drivers were taking it under the safety car to just sort of kind of get rid of it, and on some occasions get the advantage by being on this attack mode as soon as the safety car finishes. So that's kind of good. I just hope it works, because sometimes if there's a full course yellow, I mean obviously you have the attack mode in the first and second part of the race. If there's a sort of a prolonged safety car period or yellow flag period for a large significant part of one of these sections of the race, I mean, is there going to be enough time? I mean, you'd hope there's enough time. I mean, safety cars don't normally stay out for that long, but still, it's something to just think about. I just hope that makes sense and works. Nonetheless, another change in the technicals is that the attack mode power will now be increased by 10 kilowatts. That's up to 235 kilowatts now, over 225 where it was at last year. So extra power once they press that button and fly away. So that should be really exciting, and I think it's really just a good thing to have in Formula E. I personally think that fan boost should just be got rid of. I understand why it's there, to interact with the fans, but I don't think enough fans use it. And when someone like Stoffel Vandoorne is going to obviously get it every single time, it sort of takes away the point of it. Maybe if you, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a way around it, but maybe you get to pick the driver once a season, and you have to pick 14 drivers over a season to give attack mode to, but I guess people just sort of sign up through different accounts and stuff. But yeah, if they keep on with fan boost, they need to think of a different way of doing it. Or I don't know, I can't really think of a good way. Just get rid of it. A last technical change is for each minute spent under the full course yellows or safety cars, 1 kilowatt will be subtracted from the total available energy measured from the point at which the race was neutralised. So good. I don't know why they really need to do that. I mean, feel free to leave a comment down below. I guess it's to try and make it more equal, and people aren't gaining too much under these sort of scenarios. I didn't feel like it was particularly bad. So was there a real reason for this technical regulation change? Personally, I don't feel like it's going to make a massive difference, but it's done. It's in the regulations. Cool. So a couple of sporting regulations to sort of just catch up on as well, so I'll read them out to you. So sporting regulation is the fastest driver in the group of qualifying stages will be awarded a championship point. So it's a little thing there as well. So of course you see everyone go out in groups, and as we spoke about earlier, normally the people in the first group, depending on weather conditions, if it's dry, normally the people go in the first group are the slowest, so giving them a point for at least being fastest of their group gives them something out of the session, even though it's unlikely any of those guys in the first group are typically going to get through to the major sort of qualifying finale, because they're not going to have the track grip underneath them. So that's a good thing. That's a nice little advantage to just keep pushing in your individual qualifying groups. That's something that's exciting, I think, and always going to just give something extra for the championship. But then at the same time, I'm not a massive fan of points being given away for qualifying in massive championships like Formula E. It is what it is. We'll go with it. But it just means, probably 5 extra points now given away in the race. It's going to get more and more complicated, and maybe a bit unnecessarily complicated by the time we get to London and the finale. Anyway, last sporting regulation change. During a race suspension, the countdown clock would stop unless otherwise announced by the race director, with the aim of completing the full race time. So I think there were a couple of instances over the last couple of years where it was just continuing to clock down, and then of course by the time you got going again, you're missing a lot of the race. But I think the fact that Formula E doesn't really have many support series, it has the Jaguar I-Pace Trophy thing, but it doesn't really have many sort of events on over the race weekend. So they could probably always squeeze in a full race distance. They could do that. I think they could do that, so that's good. And it's nice that I think that's typically the case in most motorsport, but I think it was just on a couple of occasions over the last couple of years it sort of meant that not a lot of races, a couple of races weren't quite as good as they could have been, because they were sort of, we were sort of stripped of a couple of race laps by the red flag periods. But anyway, what I want to finally get on to say is I think we're on for the best Formula E season yet. 40 minutes into this video, it's probably what you're all waiting to hear, but I think it's really exciting for Formula E. As I said, the biggest season in terms of the amount of races we've got, the biggest season in terms of the amount of drivers and teams we've got. I think the quality of the grid is very good. I mean, if you look at it, I think there's maybe 2 drivers at a push that I would say are maybe there on for reasons other than being a very, very good driver. To put it bluntly, maybe there's a couple of paid drivers in the championship for this upcoming year, but overall, I think we've got to say this is a really, really strong field of drivers, and it's very tough to sort of put this into a list and a top 10. Trying to put together a top 10 has been very hard here, and in doing so, I know I've missed off some big drivers in the top 10, and that's tough because, you know, I think that so many of these drivers could go for the championship this year. And even one of my favourite drivers I haven't put in the top 10 because I'm unsure about where their car's going to be. So feel free to absolutely berate me in the comment section for this, because I realise that this is, if I get one of these right I'll be happy, but I don't think any of these are going to be right. But, you know, that's the sort of confidence I have in my prediction abilities. So I'm going to go from 10 to 1, and I'll throw in a Constructors' Championship out there for you guys as well. It's pretty easy. I mean, if you just, whatever. So in 10th place in the standings, I'm going to go with Alexander Sims. As I said, the BMW I think is going to be quick, but I don't think over a season Alex Sims is going to be able to quite pull together the amount of points needed to go for a championship charge. I think he'll be there or thereabouts at a lot of races, score a nice amount of points, maybe even get a victory. But I think Alex Sims maybe needs a little bit more experience, and I think maybe going into the next season, if he's still at BMW, he'll have a real shot at the championship, assuming the car is good. Mitch Evans, I think from this point onwards, I kind of feel like any of these drivers could win the championship. Maybe even Sims as well. I don't know. It's a tough one. Mitch Evans, I put in 9th place here. I feel like the only reason I put him here is that other teams might get the advantage, and I don't know whether Jaguar are going to have made those steps over the winter. I think that overall they look competent in pre-season testing. You know, they got themselves into the top 10 with both cars on the Wednesday session. Cool. But I think over a championship season they might struggle a little bit here to sort of go for the outright championship, but you know, happy to be wrong. Now, I've sort of gone with this theme that BMW could be quite good, and I think that Gunther had a pretty good year last year, to be fair. In the races he did compete in, he had a pretty good amount of solid results in there, so I put him to finish 8th. 7th place, I put Da Costa, jumping ship, obviously to Techeetah. I think that he'll score some solid points, probably a victory in there, I'm saying, but probably not quite enough for the overall championship. I've got the idea that Techeetah might not be as quick as they have been in these previous couple of seasons, so I put Vern in 6th, which is a big shout. I know that's quite a big shout there, because he could easily wrap up a 3rd championship this year and make me look like an absolute mug, which is not that far from the truth. So there we are, Vern in 6th. Ollie Rowland, I put in 5th place here. I've got a suspicion that Nissan could be quick this year. Happy to be, not happy to be wrong, because I quite like both of their drivers, so hopefully they're not that bad. But yeah, I put Rowland to finish 5th, get a couple of victories as well. I think it'd be nice to Mr. Ollie Rowland score some good victories and get some good podiums. Degrassi 4th, solid throughout for a number of years. I think it'd be very unlikely he won't be battling for the championship, so I put him in 4th. Frins I've put in 3rd. As I said, very solid driver. I think he'll battle for the championship this year, assuming his car's good. Second place, I put Bird because I think that he really needs to win a championship. I said it last year on a stream. I thought he was the best driver in Formula E last year that hadn't won a championship. By the end of the year, that looked quite a silly remark, but at the time, over those first 5 races, it looked like a quite smart, pretty smart remark. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, because he was doing quite well. Didn't end too well though. And I put to win the championship. I'm looking forward to this being very badly wrong, but Sebastian Buemi. I say this because I think Nissan are going to be good, and Sebastian Buemi, the most successful driver in Formula E history in terms of victories and podiums, I think, as well. Maybe not podiums, definitely wins. And also, I just think that he's just a very good driver. So, very interesting to see whether this is right. I mean, names to mention that I didn't even put in my top 10. Wehrlein, Collado, Mortara, Lotterer, Abt, Muller, Hartley, De Vries, Van Dorn. All those drivers could also be in the top 10. It's impossible to predict Formula E at the best of times, but especially trying to do a pre-season preview is just impossible. Yeah. Well, I can't believe we're nearly 50 minutes into this video, but it's been a really enjoyable chat here. I've just been speaking to myself, but whatever. I don't know whether I'm going to be doing a huge amount of Formula E videos on this channel over this season. I want to speak about it, but I don't know what's going to happen over the next year or so, because, you know, working full time at Formula 1 and doing other stuff as well, I think this next 12 months or even 18 months is going to be quite a busy one for me. Silly excuse, but basically in doing so I want to shout out a couple of people that I want to sort of say go over and subscribe to their channel, because I want to, you know, they've already got more subscribers than me really, but yeah, I want to appreciate their content, so go over to these guys and yeah, check out their Formula E content. So the first of which is the F1/E reviews. Now, absolute legend Dan is, and I really appreciate his content. It's absolutely fantastic, and I guess watching his videos slightly inspired me to make this one, because, you know, I wanted to give my opinions on the upcoming Formula E season, being a massive fan like he is of the sport. And yeah, just go over to his channel and subscribe. I'll leave a link in the description down below. But yeah, go and check him out. You'll love his content over the next year or so. He does put out F1 content as well, so you'll enjoy that, assuming that you like Formula 1 as well as Formula E. But, you know, he bases a lot of his content around Formula E when the season starts up, so you'll absolutely love it. And of course, Mr. FE word, or the F1 word, but he's got his own The Formula E Word channel. Now, I'm not sure what his plans are for this upcoming season. I hope that he continues to produce content over there, because it's always great stuff. So they're two guys that I think you've got to go and subscribe to for more consistent Formula E coverage of this upcoming season. I produced this video because I'm excited for what's coming with this year's championship, and I think, as I've said a number of times in this video, it's going to be the best championship yet, but in terms of what I'm going to do to cover it, I don't know whether I'm going to be having the resources and the time to be able to cover it, because I'm just going to be so busy on a lot of the weekends, is what I think at least. So yeah, go and subscribe to those two guys at least, and if you run any Formula E content, you know, whether that be a podcast or you speak about it on your channel, just leave a comment. I mean, I want to get this sort of conversation going. In no regard saying that I've got a big channel. I realise that the amount of people that watch my channel is far lower than both that watch Sean and Dan's channels at this point. But, you know, for the few people that aren't subscribed to those guys, go and do it. Be massively appreciated. But there we are. It's been this has probably been one of the longest sort of little videos I've done. I mean, looking at nearly 50 minutes, and I apologise if you've been sitting here, but it's basically turned into a little podcast. So hopefully you've enjoyed this one. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for watching or listening. I don't know whether you've been watching this. I don't even know what we're going to put in the background of this. Maybe some Formula E gameplay from R Factor. I don't know at this point, but yeah. As I said, thank you guys for watching and listening. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoy the Formula E season. I think it's going to be an absolute cracker, and I'm really excited, and hope to interact with you guys over on social media. I'll be tweeting about it, so my Twitter's down below, and also if you haven't followed me on Instagram, that's down there as well. If you haven't subscribed, there will be some Formula E content now and again, so yeah, feel free to do so. But as I said, Dan and Sean, they're going to be more consistent in terms of their uploads. yeah, I've said enough. We're 50 minutes in. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you around soon. Goodbye.